My people, this one is strong. Oh. Make sure say una share this video as una dey watch am, because dem don expose Tinubu again. One journalist wey they call David Hundeyin don expose Tinubu and his family, come expose how they acquire some property in UK. This one na investigative journalist wey dey reside for UK. I no want to talk much. Make una see how this family wey Nigeria wan enter their hand, the way they are into many criminal activities. So I want make una share this video so that people wey dey support Tinubu, may they see the kind family wey they support. Because if power enter these people hand, my dear, nobody dey save. Oh. All of Nigerian treasure will be entering into one family pocket. I beg, I no want waste on time. Share this video.
To have you against David Hundeyin.
Thank you for having me.
Just yesterday, there have been media reports, and Nigerian media has been agog with a recent report by Bloomberg containing the fact that Nigeria's president-elect Bola Tinubu's family bought a fraud-linked $11 million London mansion that his predecessor's government was seeking to confiscate as part of a probe into one of the biggest corruption scandals in Nigeria's history. There has been reactions and from Nigerians. I'd like to get your perspective on this and how significant is this report?
Okay, so I guess for anyone who has paid more than a presidency, so speaking for myself, for example, being that I'm someone who has covered the issues surrounding the potential Tinubu presidency in quite some depth, it's not really a surprise. If you recall, in July last year, the story that I published, which was titled "From Job Loss," for example, two of his youngest children, as his two youngest daughters, who are now in their early 30s, but who at the time were in their early to mid 20s, both purchased, between 2014 and 2015, purchased real estate in New York City worth a total of about $5 million in cash, paid in full and upfront, right? And one of the points that I made in that story was that how is it possible that a 22-year-old and a 25-year-old with no known source of income, no recognized employment of any sort, are in this situation where they're paying cash, full payment? This wasn't a mortgage thing or anything like that. That would have been ridiculous enough on its own, but you are paying $2.2 million or $2.5 million in cash upfront for luxury real estate, deluxe real estate that most Americans will never be able to aspire to own in their lives. And you're 22, you're 25, you've never held a job, you're fresh out of music school. What is your source of income? Okay. Apart from the fact that you happen to have a father who used to be a Nigerian public official and who has been linked to drug trafficking. So this is just more of the same if you have been following this story. However, I guess the real significance here, from the point of view of international media, is that for the first time there is sort of something that is more than just circumstantial evidence that is linking Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the sort of large-scale kleptomania, state capture, corruption, whatever you call it, that we've all known that he's guilty of, but sometimes has been sort of difficult to prove because he always acts through proxies. Yeah. So in this case, if you read the story on Bloomberg, what created a break in the case, or a break in the story for them, was that the company in question, the shell company, I think it's called Aranda, yeah. The reporting requirements surrounding the ownership of the company changed. So basically, British regulations changed, which made it mandatory for the ownership of that company to be disclosed, and that's how it will be conclusively linked to Sheikh Tinubu. So that's what. It's not as if we didn't already know that this, he has been linked to that particular property. I mean, when I was researching some of the stories I was publishing last year, that particular property came up. That property at 32, is it West Grove?
Yeah.
Grove End.
Road.
Yeah, Grove End Road in North London. Yeah. That particular property came up, and the issues surrounding it, the fact that it was acquired by Egboyega Oyetola, who himself has a deeper relationship with Tinubu than has been publicly disclosed. That in itself might become a story later on. And the fact that this property was initially obtained by Kola Aluko, who was linked to Jay-Z Alice Madueke, obviously. And basically, after the Buhari administration made a huge song and dance about going after Jay-Z specifically, as somebody who is part and parcel of the Buhari administration ended up obtaining it. This has been in the public domain for a while, but because that company for the first time, has now been conclusively linked to Tinubu. That's what made it more significant from the point of view of global press. And then I'll quickly just mention this as well. If you followed the Akbara versus Alpha Beta case from 2020, that particular company was also mentioned in those case files. So in the case summary, it was mentioned that there was a list of companies that was mentioned that Alpha Beta made this sort of unexplained transfers to, total, in the millions of dollars, right? And the contention at the time was that this is money laundering, that there was no explanation for these transfers. There was no reason why transfers of this magnitude were made to companies that were just completely unknown to anyone in the company. Who were the owners of this company? Nobody knew. So you're just seeing transfers of $1.something million going out to some shell company registered offshore, and you don't know who it's going to, why it's going there, which is, if you're familiar with how money laundering works, that's a very, very heavy red flag. So this company was mentioned in those files, and the transfer, I forget the exact sum, but a transfer was also mentioned that the transfer to this company was made in the seven-figure range in US dollars. So what it again proves is that in addition to the fact that Tinubu's son is obviously linked to a corruption scandal that is linked to the Tiziani issue and all that, Tinubu himself, via his undisclosed ownership stake in Alpha Beta, is also directly involved in running this company, because I suspect that the Tinubu being who he is, to protect himself, he would throw anybody and everybody under the bus. So the other defense might have been to claim that this is Tinubu's thing, and that the guy at the top doesn't know anything about it. But those Alpha Beta case files prove conclusively that Oga at the top, in fact, knows everything about it.
Now, David, you've done so much reports and investigative reports on the Tinubu's family, and they say, now, considering all this, are all these setting the stage for an administration to be marked by profound corruption, self-interest, profiteering at the highest levels, and conflicts of interest? What are Nigerians to look out for?
So I think you've already answered the question. When you have or what purports to be an incoming government, as you said, at the moment, it's 50-50, but we have to assume that come May 29, that there's some kind of swearing in and this person becomes president. And assuming that presidency lasts for any appreciable period of time, what you potentially then have, in addition to the things you've mentioned, which is a government which is just pockmarked with different interest groups doing things that are in their self-interest, and the national interest is going to be, it's not even going to be on the burner, whether back burner or anything. It's not going to be on the cooker at all. It's not going to be on the stove. It's going to be thrown away somewhere. Apart from that, for me, the real danger with Tinubu presidency. So there are three major dangers of Tinubu presidency. Those things you mentioned, the fact that there's just going to be all-out greed, all-out scramble for people who think that it's their turn, and then secondly, the international angle, which could result in Nigeria becoming a pariah state, Nigeria being viewed through the lens of a narco state, and us suffering in terms of travel privileges and things like that. And then the third thing, which I think is actually the most dangerous thing, is that for the first time, Nigeria would have an administration which does not even pretend, does not even pay lip service to the idea of fighting corruption. Now, successive Nigerian administrations, both military and civilian, have obviously been corrupt. But one thing that has always been across all those administrations is that even if the corruption goes all the way to the top, there is always a certain measure of self-awareness that at least we can't be seen doing this in public. So if you recall, for example, under the Jonathan administration, when the then aviation minister, what's her name again? Stella Udua. Yeah, Stella Udua was basically caught out in that scandal, which I think was it, how much was it again? 155 million naira or something like that. Yeah. You could say like 155 million naira in terms of actual corruption that Nigeria faces. 155 million naira is a drop in the bucket. It's nothing. And you could say that there were much more corrupt things going on under that administration, possibly. But just because there were those bad optics, that I can't have a cabinet minister who has been conclusively linked to a corruption scandal. Jonathan fired her, right? Which was the right thing to do. Right? It's not that the other cabinet ministers or the other prominent members of the administration didn't also have corruption issues, which were even more than that. But it's that there is that thing that Yoruba people call itiju, that sense of shame. I can't be caught doing this. I can't be seen doing this. I think under a Tinubu presidency, there will be no such thing. Because really, what reason do you have to be ashamed? What reason do you have to think that there will be political consequences for being seen or being caught doing anything? When the Oga at the top himself, there is no type of misbehavior, scandal. There's no type of negative thing that is not already linked to this person's name. So it's whether it's kleptocratic governance, state capture and theft on steroids, involvement in drug trafficking, involvement in electoral violence and thuggery, open thuggery, open affiliation with members of people of the underworld, organized crime figures like MC Oluomo, just anything negative you can think of. Someone who's vice president is someone who Kabir Sokoto, the Christmas Day bomber, was caught staying in this person's house. So when you have an administration which is filled with characters like that, and then despite all of that, they somehow make it to the point of swearing in, and they get sworn in, and they're actually in power. The signal that sends out, which in my opinion is the most dangerous thing, the signal that sends out to Nigeria, to West Africa, and the world beyond, is that Nigeria is open for everything. It's free for all now. There is no such thing as rule of law. There is no such thing as journalism. There's no such thing as trying to do the right thing or trying to ensure that the right thing is done, trying to apply pressure on public officials to ensure that there's nothing like that anymore. Right? So to people who are involved in crime, that sends a very definite message. So whether it's internet fraud you are doing, or it's kidnapping, or it's drug trafficking, whatever you're doing, you are covered now because your guy is in charge now. And even if it's not something you're affiliated with and you're involved in it, it's just the fact that this person can become president. That's an inspiration to you. That I don't have any. There's no limit to how high I can go now. And then if you're involved in something positive, something honest, something legitimate, the signal this sends out to you is that it doesn't matter. Wow. Your contribution to society isn't important, and at the end of the day, it's the people who compromise, it's the people who do the terrible things that are going to win. That ultimately you are the loser. And then to the international community, it sends the message that whatever negative, nefarious, dirty, dangerous thing that you want to do or be involved in, come to Nigeria. Nigeria is open for business.
That seems really, so to say, ominous.
This is the case where you do it. So in my opinion, that if it is avoidable at all, a Tinubu presidency should never happen.
That's quite ominous from you, David. I mean, let me also get your perspective on this. Buhari ran as the law and order candidate who will drain the swamp, so to speak. But instead, Nigerians have seen quite the opposite. How culpable is the EFCC, especially with regards to this issue that has just come out, especially with regards to this report? One would have expected that the EFCC was supposed to have probed and questioned these issues and arrested. Somebody should have been arrested at this point in time. Why is that not happening, and how culpable is the EFCC?
Well, so I guess it all boils down to the same basic issue of state capture. Even though, as I said, the Buhari administration, like the administrations before it, felt the need to at least pretend to some extent to fight corruption or whatever, the fact still remain that people like Tinubu, for example, had a very outsized amount of influence within the Buhari administration. So people like him or people around him were never really going to be, affected in any appreciable way. It was never going to happen. This goes beyond the EFCC, because the EFCC is basically the EFCC acts under the authority of presidency. So if the people who have direct access to Aso Rock are of a certain type, there's very little the EFCC can even do about it as an institution. But even within the confines of what the EFCC could do, the truth is that over the past 8 years in particular, the EFCC has become a total mockery of what we once thought it to be. Right from inception, it's important to point out that the EFCC has never been a particularly well-run institution. Not under Nuhu Ribadu, not under Ibrahim Lamord, not under what's the lady that came after him? I think it was Aisha something. Not under any of those people, and certainly not under the immediate Abdurrashid Bawa and his predecessor. Certainly not under those two. But the thing is, from 2015 to the present specifically, the EFCC has become known as a cash and carry place. So it has always been used for sort of selective prosecution and going after, but it has always been used for that right from when it was instituted by the Bashir administration. But over the past 8 years in particular, it's now public knowledge that if you get arrested by the EFCC, the only thing that is going to keep you either in their custody or basically keep you in their crosshairs and keep you in trouble is if you don't know how to negotiate properly and if you don't settle the correct people properly. It's been very well. So if you recall, between 2015 and 2017, when there was these things that people used to call media trials during that, where someone, you would just go out to work and come back, and then you just realize that your neighbor's house has under investigation by EFCC painted on the fence, and then they locked up the place, and there was a lot of drama going on at that time. And I'm sure you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised because you're a journalist, but most people would be surprised to know that out of all of that noise and signaling and drama that came out, there wasn't one major conviction that was secured.
Exactly.
Not one. So basically what happened was all of those people went and negotiated back channel with the EFCC. The ones who were guilty negotiated. They paid some certain amount, which probably would have been a drop in the pocket compared to what they actually stole. And everything went away. Even the people who were innocent, who were also caught up in those things, also paid something, because that's how the EFCC worked too. I personally know of at least one person who got caught up in this thing. This person was not a thief. This wasn't even a politician. He was a business person who got caught up. So imagine you're a supplier who supplies something to a politician, and then when EFCC comes a year later, because you are the person who sold this thing to this person, you are then said to be somebody who received stolen funds, because you did your legitimate business and you sold. And this person had his passport seized. A lot of drama, and at the end of the day, it was an 8-figure sum which he ended up releasing to the air. Like, he basically paid the EFCC to leave him alone. Right. So, and I know that it wasn't just him that things like that happened to. So where you have people like the immediate past chairman of the EFCC, the predecessor of Abdurrashid Bawa,
Magu.
For whatever reason, I seem to have completely forgotten his name now.
Magu.
Yes, Ibrahim Magu. That fellow is a very wealthy person now. Very wealthy in a way that he wasn't in 2014. So you then have to ask, between 2015 and when he was pushed out of office, what was it that happened to make Ibrahim Magu such a wealthy person? There you have your answer. So yes, the FCC played a role in it, but ultimately the buck stops on the table of the person who the FCC is answerable to, and that person is Muhammadu Buhari.
Let me get your view on this too. Tinubu has actually been inundated with a barrage of corruption and drug allegations, and the staggering number of allegations swirling around him. Legal battle actually begins on Monday as the tribunal hears the petitions. Do you see the courts reaffirming Tinubu's Shettima mandate?
If the tribunal, or the courts where it might eventually end up, upholds even the most basic tenets of law anywhere, or Nigerian law, there is simply no way that Tinubu's argument, if you can call it that, can stand up. Because in addition to the fact that both petitions, the petition of Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar, hold a lot of water, if you actually look at the counter petition which was filed by the APC, the supposed defense offered by Tinubu, you realize that there is actually no defense. No defense is offered. So the substantive issues that are raised, its involvement in drug trafficking, the fact that a forfeiture order was awarded against him, which in itself constitutes a form of conviction, the fact that he clearly committed several, not one or two, several perjuries on his INEC EC9, and that committing perjury on an INEC EC9 is one of the strongest grounds for disqualification. And then the fact that the actual conduct of the election itself was heavily, did not abide by the provisions of the 2022 Election Amendment Act itself in so many ways. And then the fact that even the pronouncement, the declaration of a winner of the election at the time when that declaration was made was completely nonsensical, because at the time when the election was made, INEC had no way of knowing who supposedly had won the election or not. They just made an announcement, right? So when you look at the APC's response to these issues, you realize that the strategy they seem to have adopted is kind of like the strategy. If you recall, when we were in secondary school, we used to have a debate club, and then you have two teams debating against each other. One team has come prepared, they've done their research, they've practiced public speaking, they've done everything, and then the other team found out 10 minutes to time that they're going to be on this topic. So the strategy they now adopt is to look for the most boisterous, noisiest person from within the group, and send that person forward and tell the person that person's job is just, anytime this group says something, or deploys a point, your job is just to throw it back at them and say it's a lie, it's not true, blah, 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 and just basically use noise to scatter the whole thing, turn the debate into a brawl, basically a verbal brawl, a verbal street fight, because that's the only way that they have any chance of winning. Because if you leave it at an intellectual level, there's a huge disparity. So it seems like that's what the APC is trying to do here, because if you read through their response, they're not even directly contesting the issues that are raised. All they're just saying is, oh, it's a lie, it's not true, or this candidate has not provided evidence. Meanwhile, candidate has provided evidence, right? So for example, I accuse you of having submitted a forged certificate, right? And then I provide evidence that this is the certificate you submitted, this is a certified true copy of the document you submitted to INEC, and then this is what the actual certificate should look like based on what was obtained under subpoena from the university. This and that, that's prima facie evidence that what you submitted is a forgery. And then your response to that is, you've not provided any evidence. What does that mean? And that seems to be the APC's entire strategy, just basically make a lot of noise. So which leads me to believe that, because clearly, I mean, they have people like Wale Oladipo SAN working with them, and I know, to the best of my knowledge, before you can become a SAN in Nigeria, you need to be quite proficient at your job. You can't be stupid and be a SAN. So my suspicion is that this petition response that the APC has put together is a red herring. This is not the actual strategy. My suspicion is that they intend to just delay and drag this thing out for as long as possible, so that it will get to May 29 and then this person will be sworn in. And then after he's sworn in, and then he has the powers of the presidency available to him, then they take it from there. Because as you know, the Nigerian president is one of the most internally powerful presidents in the world. The Nigerian president has powers that you and I don't know about. So basically the idea, I think, is just throw any, pardon my French, bullshit at them. Just throw anything you can find. It doesn't need to make sense. Just throw it at them. Keep them busy, and keep the courts or the tribunal busy and occupied dealing with nonsense. So I expect them to file all sorts of frivolous motions and counter motions to eat up as much time as possible. They've already started doing that. So one of the things mentioned in their counter response, they've challenged the I believe the what was it that was mentioned? It's something about how supposedly Peter Obi was not a member of the, or not qualified to be a member of the candidate of the Labour Party because XYZ. It's a completely nonsensical argument. But as nonsensical as it is, the court has to give a ruling on it as long as it has been filed. So that will take up hopefully 1 or 2 days, and then they'll file something else, and then maybe they will challenge the jurisdiction of the trial. Those tricks that Nigerian lawyers play to obtain justice by technicality. They one technical motion after the other they will file to eat up 20 days until we get to May 29, and then after that, okay, now that he's president, it's now a different ball game. So after, I've heard, for example, from legal experts that even though perjury is one of the issues which has been mentioned in the petition, if he's sworn in to listen to the charge of perjury, because perjury is a criminal is a criminal charge, and a president cannot be charged criminally because he has constitutional immunity. So that would then create this legal gray area, which we've never really, and then the courts will then have to decide, can the sitting president actually be charged, or even if he has been charged already, can they listen to the charge of perjury against the sitting president? And then there'll be a whole back and forth about that. So I think that's what the APC strategy actually is, to eat up as much time as possible, and then hope that if he's sworn in, then the fact of his incumbency as president will then change the material status of the case.
Finally, we seem to have run out of time, okay? David, Nigeria seems to have resigned themselves to fate as far as this is concerned. Isn't that a cause for worry?
It absolutely is a cause for worry, and I understand why it's easy to think, you know what, let's just, we gave it our best shots, we did everything we could, we organized ourselves politically, we backed certain candidates that we thought would take Nigeria away from the APC status quo of 8 years, and there's sufficient data and evidence to suggest that the APC actually lost the election heavily, but that they simply went and declared their candidate winner anyway. And it turned out that they have the judiciary in their pockets, they have this, they have that, they have security forces in their pockets. So actually we can't do anything, so let's just move on and hope that the next 8 years will not be as bad as the preceding ones. I can understand why people might think that way, But one of the things that I learned shortly after fleeing Nigeria, I'm not going to mention the person who told me this, but this was someone one of the people that went into voluntary exile with me at the time. One of the things he told me at a period when I was going through a very dark personal period, when I left Nigeria, I lost everything that I had in Nigeria, including the relationship I had, everything. I lost everything. I went through my life savings in like 3 months. It was really bad, and I was in like a really bad mental space. And what this guy told me was, look, before you give in to despair, exhaust all possibilities first. So as long as you still have 1, 2, 3, 4 options in front of you, make sure you chase all those options. Exhaust all your possibilities and opportunities first before you allow yourself to fall into despair. So I think that's what I would suggest that people who are thinking that way should do as well. That before you give in to your dark thoughts, before you give in to despair and say, oh, we did our best, but this person, this level of evil is just too, we can't compete. Before it gets to that point, make sure you've exhausted all your opportunities first. What are the opportunities in front of us? First of all, there's a petition hearing in front of a tribunal. Now, can that tribunal or the courts be compromised? Yes, they can. What is it that can stop them from potentially being compromised or delivering a judgment that will be a miscarriage of justice? I think the number one antidote to that is sunlight, is exposure. So there's an ongoing campaign, for example, to ensure that the petitions are screened on live television. I think more people should jump on that, because where the judiciary is aware that they are under public, local, and international scrutiny, they are less likely to misbehave. A lot of these things that happen, and I say this as someone who has had some interaction with the Nigerian legal system before. I've been part of an 8-year process in Nigeria before, and what I witnessed there told me very clearly that if this was for example, in an open courtroom, or if this was being screened on live television, this judge I'm looking at will not be misbehaving like this. This judge is being a rascal. This judge is being dishonest, and this judge is lying. I've seen that with my own 2 eyes before. But because it's a closed session, so they can get away with it, and there's nothing you can do. You're not even allowed to record it. So I think if sufficient pressure can be placed on the judiciary to ensure that this tribunal is televised live, so the judges know that they are under scrutiny and there's certain things they cannot do, that in itself will be a very powerful thing. Something else that can be done is to ensure that even just public conversation, just social media buzz, as trivial as it might seem. I mean, obviously, last election should have shown us that social media buzz is not trivial at all. But even something as that is perceived to be as trivial as social media buzz, if people can keep up that energy and continue talking about this thing and refuse to get distracted by the usual, Big Brother Nigeria, football, this person slept with that person, all those things that always distract Nigerian social media audiences, and keep focused on this tribunal, that if for the 20+ days that this tribunal will be sitting in this month of May, there's no other conversation. It's like kind of like how it was during NSAS, that there's no other topic of conversation on social media. These people will sit up. So before giving in to that despair that these guys have won, they've done it again, this person is too powerful, blah blah blah, make sure you exhaust all the options in front of you first.
David, thank you so much.